everyone, Katie Griffith with Bright Solutions here. I'm so excited to bring you another episode of the bright side of AI. At Bright Solutions, we help senior living organizations optimize the way that they use technology. So, the purpose of the bright side of AI is to allow individuals in senior living to really get started on their journey, to really start to learn about AI, understand how it can be used within senior living organizations, and really start to see some best practices and ideas so that you can begin your own journey with AI within your organization. So today, I'm so excited to have Aime with us. Thank you so much, Aime, for joining us today. If you could introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aime Harrison. I work for a nonprofit senior services organization in Western PA. We serve 7,500 residents, clients, and I am the director of special projects, which is a very broad term, but my current largest project is centered around optimizing our EHR and integrating that EHR all the way down to frontline team workflows. So I'm really excited to be here today to share, our journey with all of you.
Great. Thank you so much, Aime. That's really exciting. Something that we're always noticing within senior living organizations is that we have these big investments in technology platforms, and we've rolled it out. It's up and running, it's working, but there's so much more that we can be doing with these platforms, right? Than as compared to when we went live on day one. It's just chock full of opportunity, but we get busy, right? And we're like, whoo, that was so hard to get this up and running. We're tired, right? So I love that you're going back and you're saying, okay, let's really take this to the next level with this platform. I'd love to hear more details about that and what you've been able to accomplish with that so far.
Yeah, sure. So really we started out because we were with a previous platform, another platform. And so in 2023, we made a decision to migrate over to a new platform. And we're a relatively large organization. That's a heavy lift, right? And so, you know, just like you said, it was survival of just like let's get from point A to point B. And, that happened. And then 2023 through 2024, we were doing okay, but then realized, wow, like this feels a little clunky. It's not exactly like what we thought it was going to be. And then, as an organization, we're moving through all of the work, realize that maybe we're not using all of the product that we bought, to the best of its ability. And so, we had several iterations of how do we tackle that problem, and ultimately boiled down to end of 2024 creating a steering committee. And so I am the leader of that steering committee. And essentially what it is it's just allowing us to take a breath, really analyze the problems that we're seeing and seeing what we're trying, understanding the tools that we have now in our toolbox, and making sure that the platform is supporting the practice that we want to provide to our customers and to our residents and service. And so it sounds simple when you describe it that way, but when you take that from, we have a number of skilled communities and personal care communities. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing and utilizing the product in its own way, or not utilizing it at all, right? And made the jump and is still doing it on paper, or whatever it is. Just making sure that everybody comes along so that you can get all of the information where you want it to be, so that as an organization, you can use that information to help you in growing how you impact senior living, overall. So that's kind of the big picture of what we've been doing so far.
Yeah, and the fuel for AI in the future is your data, right? So
Hmm.
if people are on paper still, or if they're not utilizing the tool in the way that you expect them to, and not having a reliable data being entered into the system and maintaining that information, then AI doesn't have the right information to work from, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
what are some of the major things that you've been able to achieve from a data perspective through this effort?
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting is, we are, as an organization, utilize some AI, and it was interesting. We utilize like scrubbers essentially to go through our documentation to help us identify different diagnoses or risk factors in residents so that we can identify readmission risk or whatever, what have you. What we learned was perhaps the documentation wasn't complete or it was not as thorough. So, if there's nothing to catch because it's not being documented, then we're not utilizing that tool either. We're not feeding it good information. So, one effort that we've put in place is really just making sure that the information that is flowing within the pathway of our AI tools, is as complete and thorough as possible. And so making sure that we're utilizing the right forms, that those forms then flow into the right area so that it can
Yeah.
be swept in so that we can have reports that are accurate and that we can trust in order to make, good clinical decisions. That again, that was a big deal because in the past we had stagnant forms. It was just like a digital piece of paper that didn't necessarily flow anywhere, let alone in front of where our AI bot was going. So that was a big lift for us and moving us in the right direction of making sure that we're getting the right data in the right place so that we can leverage those tools.
That's fantastic. And, you know, I'm thinking about, I know so much of what you're saying is resonating with so many people in our industry because they're kind of find themselves in the same boat of, we have this tool, we don't know if everyone's using it the way they need to be using it. What do we do next? And it just illustrates for me organizations that are saying, like, well, we don't really use AI yet. There's so much, I hate to say there's so much work to do, but there's a lot that we need to be doing, even if today we're not using AI, but we
Mhm.
need to be in there. And when you talked about the steering committee, what we what we call it usually is a platform excellence committee. So for your major core platforms in an organization, we need to have a steering committee or platform excellence committee that's looking at, are we using this and are we using it well, and who needs more training? And we can start with understanding current state, right? So whether it's, sometimes we've done like self-assessments for the different communities to kind of assess themselves, and we structure the questionnaire in a way that it can help them realize, okay, here's the areas where I can improve with this platform. But, getting that information and having some measurements to where we can see, uh-oh, these three communities are struggling in a certain area with this platform. Let's go give them some more training and, find out if there's a blocker or a reason that they're not able to follow the process. And then getting that data more and more accurate as well as thorough, right? And consistent. That's something that I think pretty much every organization could be working on today,
Mhm.
regardless. And then that's just going to be fuel for their AI in the future.
Right, right. I think, you bring up the excellent point. So I happen to, and we have talked about, what was the driving factor. So I happened to go to a conference where, our EMR platform, EHR platform was just sharing their future, their roadmap, right? And AI was everywhere, like AI. this is the solution. And in my head, as I'm watching these fantastic presentations, I'm thinking, we're not ready. We're
Right.
not ready. We're not ready. Like we need to A, B, C. We need to make sure we need to jump off of paper into the system. We need to make sure that like all the information is where it needs to be. But then the heavier lift, and I think the more daunting one, I know certainly on our end of it is not just like where does it go in the system? It's how do you modify the team's workflow from what it is currently, that comfort level of seeing it, on paper and they know exactly where it's going. How do you lift it off the page and put it into a system? How do you demonstrate the value
Right.
that it will have to that frontline team member to get that behavioral change, right? To make sure that you are building a sustainable workflow that they buy into, and then they can also see the rewards of it. If I do this, then the system will help me do this, and I'll have more time with my resident to, that I want to have. Being able to demonstrate that
Yes.
and get that behavioral change essentially is one of the heavier lifts that I know we found on our side. There are a
Yeah.
lot of really old workflows that have worked for us for a really long time, and these new tools that are coming out at such a fast pace, it's challenging. It's challenging to deploy them, and it's challenging to get buy-in for them, even though like it's coming. I think it's really hard to let go of old things. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we face, not just knowing what information to put where, but then also getting your team to buy in and understand their part in making that work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm hearing you say is, how do we articulate the current state of the individuals that are impacted, right? Here's how you're doing things today. Here's the pain points that you've expressed to us. Here's what's dragging you down administratively, preventing you from doing more meaningful work, having more face time with the residents, and then illustrating for them the ideal state, the future state, and saying, here's how it can be. And then, having them engaged in the development. So obviously in your
Mhm.
organization, certainly you're not going to have everyone engaged, right? But you're going to identify some champions that can help, that you can bring along in the process of creating that ideal future state and talking about how you're going to be able to do that and how the workflows will change. And then you're creating buy-in with those champions that then can go be the first ones to deploy it, and then kind of spread the word and help with that change management across the organization.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly, the steering team, is a little bit of overall governance, but then we have good representation on that team. But then when you get to, when you're getting to workflow development and you're really trying to implement like effective implementation, we will then pull in as close as we can, if not the frontline team, to say, hey, like these are the confines of which we have to operate within these parameters, but we want your feedback on, what is it that would be more effective, and again, I think the big thing about any technology or any change, right, is understanding that each change is really an iteration and it's not final, right? We should always be consistently and constantly reevaluating where we are and making sure that it's still the right move for us at this point in time, especially now as everything is changing so rapidly. Just
exactly.
really, and I think that also helps with buy-in, right? To say, like, just because we decide it now doesn't mean that it's never ever going to change again. It's This is the next best step. Let's see what we learn, and then we'll move on from there. And so trying to bring in the frontline team. We're a big proponent in our organization of letting the frontline team, as much as we can, drive those changes is really helpful in a pretty sizable task. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's incredible. What are you excited about next in the future, or whether it's short term for this project or even longer term for our industry with where things are going with technology?
So I think that I'm excited for a lot of things. But one thing that I am really intrigued by is person generated health data, right? So your wearables, your smartwatches, like those types of things. Because I think that that is going to give us a whole different set of data to drive health overall, and especially health in senior living. So if you think about, any clinical trial, the administrative burden and the difficulty of constructing any kind of clinical trial in older adult populations, it's just hard to do. And so to collect meaningful data that could impact that population is just so hard. And I think it creates a lag, right, in the information, the actionable information that you have to employ on a clinical basis. So I think having things like smartwatches available will help us understand how residents move, how often they move, like we would, we'll be able to detect maybe or predict when they're not feeling so well before they even know that they're not feeling so well, and really, use that information to our advantage, not only from a population health, but then we're getting all the way down to the individual person, right? And being able to drive individualized care. So I just think with accessibility to a whole new data set comes a whole other level of possibility of, especially within AI, of predicting and modeling how to care for older adults and how to help them best.
I love what you're saying because I'm often saying, of course we can be more efficient. We can reduce administrative burden, increase meaningful work. But let's also look at the opportunities for net new
Mhm.
solutions that we can create now because of the data that we have and because of automation or AI that can do more with this data. I mean, everything can be custom at this point that before we couldn't because it would take a person to sit there and
Mhm.
create
Yeah,
all these things. But
right.
what is the net new we can offer this service? And also, this data is your asset that can
Mhm.
be used to create these new experiences or new opportunities that you can deliver to your current audience or a new audience. I mean, so
Mhm.
it's very exciting. It's such an
Yeah.
exciting time for all of us.
Yeah, it is. It's gonna revolutionize healthcare. I believe that.
Absolutely. I agree. And I love that you're stepping onto the journey. You talked about going to the conference and saying, wow, they're about to, come out with all these things. We better be ready. And I commend you for getting on the journey. And that's what we want everyone to do is just get on this journey and start now. And we actually have our free AI toolkit for senior living on our website. And on there is an assessment where you answer two questions and it gives you your where you are on the innovation maturity scale. And it's actually a great way to get this. There's also a report that comes with it, depending on what level you're at. It's going to tell you here's where you are today, and here's what you need to do next to progress on that maturity scale, which is amazing because then when you're sitting in a conference like that, you kind of know, okay, we're here and we're going to move forward on our, overall maturity and be ready for these things as they come out in the future. So I encourage you to check that out and anyone watching, check that out as well. And Amy, I just really appreciate your time today and sharing your experiences because I know it's so valuable to operators out there that are considering the same types of solutions.
Thank you. Happy to chat.
All right, thanks.